Like somebody practicing medicine that shouldn't. They want to help people, but they end up killing people because of it. And I see too much. I see. And then they don't know if they make a mistake. How do you know if you made a mistake? You're a law school student. How do you know if you should have won the case? You don't know. Yeah. And the people are gone. They're down in Guatemala now. They're never going to find out.
And they're never going to complain.
No. So, you know, I mean, there's a whole problem overall. That's why I teach. You know, I teach this. I teach it once a year. I get lawyers that fly from all over the country, and I teach immigration law once a year. And then I teach it to nonprofits once a year.
How long is the course?
1 week long. I got a website. It's Midwest Legal Immigration Project. You just go to my law website. You'll see a button for it.
Is that only for lawyers? Or
No, I got it 2 parts. One for lawyers. It's basically the same course. They're both 1 week long. But one for lawyers is a little higher. And then the one for nonprofits is a little easier. You know, because the lawyers, they know more stuff and everything. But it's because there's nobody else teaching it in the whole country.
Really?
And I've done it for 8, 9 years. People love it. You wouldn't believe it. After 5 days, I get a standing ovation. After 5 days. You can't believe it. After 5 days of one person, they want to shoot you.
At Benzoni Law.
Yeah, benzonilaw.com. And you'll see a button right in the top. Click the button and you go to the website.
When is the next one?
In January 2009.
I want to take it.
Oh, well, look. Just click on that. And the one in January was cheaper. The one in what we do, here's what we do. We use the one in June if we make money. We charge the lawyers serious money. If we make money, then we use that to fund the one in January for the nonprofits because we don't charge them only our costs.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, well, I mean...
How many students do you have?
Well, the most I ever had was 38. And then it sometimes not, you know, I think I only had 16 or 17 last June. I like 38, 50. That's a nice number.
You're going to have a second section next year.
Yeah, well, I'd like to. I like it. But we did a second session 2 years ago. We had 30 lawyers the first time.
To hear from you, one is, you know, sort of an update of what's happened from the day of the hearing, and then sort of like the whole...
Well, as far as from the day of the hearing goes, it's my understanding that the Iowa Attorney General is filing or preparing to file criminal charges against post-fill, agri-processors, and I'm not sure of individuals, but against the plant for the labor law violations and the child labor law violations. And I haven't seen the indictment yet, but I'm understanding it's either going to come down or it's coming down maybe today or tomorrow. And so what's happened since the last time you were here actually is the U.S. Attorney's Office has given ankle bracelets to several witnesses and is working to give them work cards. And they're supposed to be witnesses against agri-processors. So that's part of the deal.
They've given them ankle bracelets and work cards?
Both. Well, because they're material witnesses. See, they should be deported, right? But they want to keep them here. Well, if they're going to keep them here, then they got to have a way to earn a living. See? Because if they deport them, hey, you're helping out agri-processors, right? You're deporting the witnesses against them. The agri-processors are like that, which is why they were so stupid what they did in the first place. But anyways, the U.S. Attorney's Office is doing that. I was up at a hearing for it, about a month ago now, up at the Cedar Rapids Federal Court with material witnesses. And that's what they were offering, was that you be a witness for us. And they still have the deportation order, but they're going to stop it for right now. They're going to make them wear an ankle bracelet so they know where they are. And they're going to give them a work card. It's probably good for a year. So
there's the U.S. Attorney Office and the Iowa.
Right. The U.S. Attorney's Office is doing that part, and I understand that they're looking at criminal, but I have no idea what they're looking at, if anything, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I think that I think they're somewhat embarrassed about what happened, but regardless, let's hope that their good intentions are winning out and they're actually doing what they should do. The Iowa Attorney General, however, is my understanding, is proceeding. That's much more definite than the U.S. Attorney. Quite honestly, I know what the U.S. Attorney Office has offered for the immigrants, but I have no idea what they want to be a witness for. And it may be that the U.S. Attorney's Office is doing this so the state has witnesses, because the U.S. Attorney's Office is not telling me what they're up to. I know they have a grand jury looking at this stuff, but I have no idea if they're going to do anything about it or not.
Now, there were two supervisors that pleaded guilty.
They weren't supervisors. They were floor managers.
Floor manager.
They were low level, like what we would call foremen or shift supervisors or something. They're the guys on the floor, the crew foremen. Calling them supervisors or managers is a bit over the top. Then, in other words, they were in charge of other people, but that doesn't make them.
What they call what they call? But no, mayordomo.
Major. Exactly. They're kind of they're one step above everybody else.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much
They're the
it.
ones with the whip.
They got the whip, right? But they're part of the immigrants. I think they had good green cards, so they could get away with a little more. But they're going to be deported too.
Yeah.
But that was, that's the low-level, petty stuff. The same thing they did in Marshalltown. They got the Union Steward. Big deal. I mean, it's easy to get little people.
So before we go into this, how do you feel about the hearing outcome
About the...
when everybody was here?
Oh, I thought what happened here, the hearing outcome here, I thought was great. We have a good judge. And he gave everybody that asked for it voluntary departure. He gave them adequate time to leave. And the other ones, we're still arguing over the bracelet and stuff, but we're going to have U visas for the others. And I was very pleased, actually, with the outcome. It's pretty standard. Yeah. When you have a good judge, you get a good decision. He gave everybody 30, 60 days to leave, get their stuff together. And that's the other side of this, is everybody knows that's part of the game. I mean, it's been going on for, 100 years or whatever. Well, when you think of Mexico, bringing workers up, right, coming up here, staying 4, 5, 6 years, going back. And periodically, the United States goes through this big cleaning process and deports everybody. You remember in the 30s, they deported American citizens back to Mexico just out of Los Angeles just because they were Hispanic. And so,
I didn't know.
Yeah. They paid the Mexican government to ship them down to the middle of Mexico. They paid the train companies. Oh, yeah, they just did clean sweeps. I mean, it's part of our history. We've done it, and then we relax, right? And then we get, and then we relax. And then we need workers, and so we all relax. And then, then we get tough. And so, it's kind of like the Fugitive Slave Act. I mean, it's very much like the Fugitive Slave Act. If you don't have papers, north of the Mason-Dixon line, we arrest you, we put you in jail, federal law, and we ship you back south, right? Papers. Not having papers gets you carted out of here.
The
Fugitive Slave Act, yeah. Iowa was very proud of our Underground Railroad, but we're okaying this nonsense. Of course, the Fugitive Slave Act, it's about having papers, the status. You don't have legal status, you're a slave. You got legal status, you got what they call emancipation papers, you get to stay. Same thing. What's the hell's the difference? Status. So all it got to do was status. And when you draw boundaries, remember the whole boundary issue is very European. It's a European, came out of 400 years of wars, 500, 1,000 years of wars between Germany and France and Italy and Spain and England. And finally they settled on borders. And the borders in Europe are drawn on ethnocentric lines, right? Spain is Spanish, speaks Spanish, and is Catholic. France speaks French and is Catholic, right? Holland, the Netherlands, speaks, what do they speak? Dutch, and they're Protestant, right? German is split, which is why it took Germany so long to become a country. Germany in the north is Protestant and the south is Catholic. And it took them up until the 1870s under Bismarck to become a country. Italy took them forever to become a country, right? Because they're always fighting among themselves. And you still got the Balkans, right? The Muslims and the Serbs and the Croats, of course, are Catholic. And they speak their own languages. So Europe is split up along ethnocentric lines. And they now have peace. Since the Napoleon Wars, until you got World War I and World War II, you got huge, massive, because of Germany, bloodlettings in the two world wars. But Europe, this idea of nation states is a European idea. Okay, it's European. We're European. So we try to bring the idea of a nation state to America, but America is not set up for nation states. Iowa, New York, go ahead.
No.
Rhode Island, our individual states are considered sovereign states, and when they were first started, they were very jealous of their borders and their boundaries and their rights and prerogatives. And so when you start understanding the whole concept of a nation state and borders and walls and all that, it's a European concept. And we're trying to make that European concept fit in North American terms. And it doesn't fit. Why? Because you have huge land masses, Canada. There's no ethnocentricity there. United States of America, what's America? Man, you got the Bronx, you got the South, you got blacks, you got American Indians, you got the Southwest. You don't have an ethnocentric identity, no matter what Stephen King wants to tell you. We're not all white and English speaking. We're not all, Northeastern or Midwestern. We're very different culturally, very different religiously. So trying to apply the idea of a nation state to the United States just does not work. What we are is an empire. We're actually two things. We're a federation, right? 50 sovereign states that have gotten together. And we're also an empire. In other words, we continuously expand our borders, going bigger and bigger and bigger, called manifest destiny. And our obtaining of Mexico, northern Mexico, in both the War of Texas Secession and the American-Mexican War, was an empire building. It was actually consciously. We did it on purpose to get that territory, right? We wanted it. So it's an empire building. And when we sucked it into this thing called the United States of America. But we're not a country. And that's important to understand, because when we say building a border between us and Mexico, it's not like a border between France and Germany. We're trying to create identity. That's our problem. America's problem is we don't have an identity. I mean, it's not a problem. It's a wonderful thing that we don't. But people want to stick an identity on us. They want to make us Anglo, right? English speaking, Northern European. But that's not us. That's not America. What, you're Russian? You ain't Anglo? You're Bosnian? You ain't Anglo? You're African? You're not Anglo? You're Hispanic? You're not Anglo, right? So what you've got is Northern European mentality trying to stake a claim over the United States of America, philosophy and history. And you just can't do it. So you can't fit it. It will never work. You can't build a border big enough that'll keep in the idea of America. Because the idea of what America is reaches all around the world. It's what everybody wants. It's what everybody in their heart dreams of. It's what the Israelis talked about with Moses in the Promised Land. It's what the Muslims talk about. Everyone. This idea of America is way bigger than any country. It can never be a country. Because it's us. It's humankind. The ideal of America is the ideal of humankind. It's the ideal of Jesus Christ. It's what it's all about. And trying to pin it into a country denies its very existence. How can you say United States of America is a country? It's United States. It's United States of America. It's not divided states of America. If you're going to divide, then you can put walls up and say, this is mine, this is yours, and keep out. I'll shoot you if you cross the border. But if it's united, you can't put a wall up. There's no wall that can contain that idea. So in putting a wall would kill the United States. It's our choice. I mean, we can choose to go like Europe, and look at Europe. Every 50 years they kill 50 million people, right? World War I, World War II, the Franco-Prussian War, right? The Napoleonic Wars. I mean, just look at Europe. Every 50, 60 years, just a huge bloodbath of wars. And not only that, but they take their wars all over the world, right? Europe, they go to China, they go to Africa, they go to Latin America. Spanish killed almost 10 million Indians in Latin America. I mean, just think of that. The British killed, what, a couple 100,000 here, because there wasn't that many. They killed as many as they could, or we did, you know. But the idea is that Europe, that whole thing of Europe, of nation states, the colonialism, they've carved up the world and created tremendous chaos, tremendous suffering, just incredible suffering. We've broken the natural order of things. We meaning the Northern Europeans. And now we're dealing with the effects of that, whether you're talking atomic war, the spread of AIDS and disease, the environment, global warming, all these different things. We're talking about a total smashing of the natural order of things. And you have to understand that if you're going to fix it. I mean, it's like Al Gore talks about. You've got to understand what's going on if you're going to fix it. You've got to understand immigration if you're going to fix it. You've got to understand what's going on in Latin America and NAFTA. And the whole thing of the Indians now in Latin America starting to become more educated and demanding their rights, right? The indigenous peoples. And you've got to understand the effects of the Hispanic I mean, the European Spanish who have controlled Latin America for the last 400 or 500 years and still do to some extent. And you got to understand the way that America has put its hand in to control events in Latin America and in Central America. And Guatemala is a really good example, but also in Chile, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, in Colombia, in Venezuela, Argentina. We put our hand in, whether it's manipulation, the CIA, monetary manipulation with international companies. And the problem is, every time you do that, you break the natural order. You break something. You don't even know you're breaking it. You know, the way that the Belgian broke the Congo. They killed over half the people in the Congo. And so you have to understand all these things if you're going to make a world that's going to work. You can't, it's not a flat world. The world's not flat. You can't just change this and everything is okay. You have to change here, your inner being, the way that you are. You have to relate to everybody as your brother, as your sister, as family, as one. No separation, no countries, no boundaries. The only reason to have countries or boundaries is for traffic control, right? You drive on the right side of the road so you don't hit everybody else coming the other way, right? You have boundaries and borders for traffic control. And that makes it easy. In other words, you got so many people here, so you need so much food, you need so much infrastructure, so many schools, so much water. You have so many people over here. So it helps to have boundaries for those reasons, just like how we have state boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. That helps for taxation, for census, and things like that. State boundaries is the way the world is supposed to be. The entire world is supposed to be, would work the way the United States is. Uh-huh. So all you got to do is take the idea of the United States and just keep expanding it. Why not? You know, there's 32 Mexican states. Why not make them all states of America? There's 17 or whatever Canadian provinces. Why not make all them states of America? Give them all a vote. I don't know if they want it or not, but why not?
Well, but there's a constitution that applies to the United States.
Oh, yeah, 13. 13. How do we get another 40-something or 37? Uh-huh. There's a process to adding more. We've added 37 more since the first 13, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Puerto Rico, they keep trying it down there. They ain't quite got it yet. Someday they probably will. But why not just keep adding more? Why not make that our objective? Instead of building a wall and a fence, why not say, hey, this world is big enough for all of us. And here's an idea of how to do it. And if you don't like that idea, you can have your own idea and just become part of it. Uh-huh. You know, every state has got its own right to set up its own criminal system and its own, but they have to follow certain federal norms overall, mm-hmm. right? But within their state, they're free to set up their own laws and education, everything. I think the United States has got lots of flexibility. I think it could actually work. I think the United Nations is kind of the idea, but they can't get there from the United Nations. It has to start somewhere. And this is where it starts. It starts in America. This is it. This is the world's hope right here, right in Iowa. Well, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Guatemala, come on. Spain will chop everybody up again.
Now they're not letting in anybody. Yeah.
Africa, my God, Africa, Jesus. We should be over there. Our troops should be in Africa, not in Iraq. Seriously. That's where they should be. They should be in Africa. We could have half the troops there with no up-armored vehicles, and they would quiet that place down. We'd be building schools and roads instead of getting blown the shit out of us. And we wouldn't have to settle little wars between the Shiites and the Sunnis. You know what I mean? Yeah. But anyways.
So why is Postville important?
Postville has been a turning point. It actually is. Well, because Postville, the federal government actually took the gloves off and hammered the immigrants with their bare fists. And they did it on purpose, and they broke the Constitution in doing it, and they didn't care. That's why it's important. They didn't care. They just forgot about civil rights and the rule of law. And they worshipped the rule of law in letter only, but not in spirit. And they violated people's rights all over the place, and they did not give a damn. And the other reason why it's important is because a lot of people woke up and started saying something about it. And you notice the last raid in Mississippi, they did not do it. They talked about NPR, they did not do it. It looks like they backed up. No, here, what happened in Postville was, at least from what I can see, is the executive and the judicial forgot their boundaries. And the judge became part, at least it looks like, became part of the prosecution team. And that is reminiscent of what happened in the 1930s in the Third Reich, when the judges and the lawyers stopped standing up to the executive, the prosecution, and started rubber stamping with the prosecution. In other words, who did the 1930s in Germany. And that's really scary when the judges are no longer independent, but they're simply an arm of the state. And the beauty of our constitutional separation of powers is that, and this is the beauty of our founders, that the men who thought this up, was they set up an independent judiciary. I mean, that was the key here. The judiciary was not owned by the king and not owned by Parliament, for that matter. It was independent. Neither Congress nor the President controls the judiciary. And then our first really strong Chief Justice, John Marshall, made it that way, created this entity of august wisdom called our United States Supreme Court. Not that they've always been perfect, but he created this aura about it of respect and authority, and you can't touch us, because if you touch us, you will defile everything, right? And so the Supreme Court has maintained an authority. But here they forgot that. And there's been times over our history where the judicial has forgotten that. And we've suffered. And it takes a while to remember that. The Civil Rights Movement's a good example. Plessy v. Ferguson, the Dred Scott decision. But there's others where the Lochner decision, where they side with the government against the unions. You know what I mean? Where they make lopsided decisions. And you saw your greatest example of it with Roosevelt during the 1930s. And he had his court packing scheme to back him down because they kept throwing out his different reforms. So this tension between the executive and the judiciary is built into the Constitution on purpose. And it's done for the very reason that we saw here, to keep the executive in check. Nobody's worried about the judges becoming too powerful, but it's to keep the king in check. And that was forgotten in Postville. And I think that now they remember it because a lot of lawyers have been raising hell about it.
There was a manual that was given to the...
Yeah, isn't that cute? Yeah, a roadmap.
Tell us about it.
Well, the manual was given to defense lawyers to tell them how the fast track system is going to work, what they should say, how they should say it. And it's posted on the ACLU website, and I actually have a copy of it. I can show you the copy if you want it.
Sure.
You want me to get it?
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll get it for you right now.
So they gave one to every one of the 8 attorneys?
Every one of them. And anyone that would not agree to follow the script and do this sort of thing had to give back the book, which tells you what they wanted to do with the book. Keep it under wraps.
Wasn't there one attorney that walked out?
One attorney walked out, that's my understanding. Yeah, God bless him. I mean, think about it. How can you represent 17, 18, 20 people in a language you don't even know in the period of 5 days in a felony charge in federal court? Now, you got to understand, first of all, federal court is very formal, much more formal than state court. State court, whatever happens, happens, and you kind of wing it and get stuff done. But federal court is very formal. There's a hearing for almost everything. For instance, there's an initial appearance, then there's a detention hearing, which a lot of these people would go to and not get out because they're immigrants. They'd have an ICE detainer. And then they'll have various hearings for any motions that lawyers might follow. There'll be a pretrial, and of course a trial or a plea hearing, and then they'll do a formal pre-sentence investigation report, write it up, sometimes 20, 30 pages, and then there's a sentencing. And each hearing, there may be 2 or 3 weeks between each one. And if they went to trial, then of course you're going to have, these would be 2-day trials. They're pretty short. I mean, they wouldn't, they got false papers, right? So somebody comes in, they have false papers, you get agent in, they swear under oath. You get somebody in that says, yeah, I found the false papers at the plant, and here it is, and the guy's got his name and photograph and somebody else's social security number, right? And then you got a jury that says guilty, takes them half an hour between coffee and lunch to do it. So it'd be a 2 to 3 day trial for each person, right? And unless you allege a conspiracy, they all get separate trials. So you're talking, what, 300 separate trials? Because it'd be hard to tie all these people into the same conspiracy. You know.
So how did they manage to get them all 10 at a time?
Well, if you don't understand English, first of all, and you grew up in a country that's totalitarian where the police kick in the door and bust your dad and maybe shoot your dad, like Guatemala, shot a lot of people's dads, beat them up, hung them from bridges, whatever. That's part of it. Part of it is you're poor, you're the man, you got 3 children in a home you're feeding and a wife, and they come in and they say, you got to make a decision. Either you say yes and you get 5 months, or you say no and you get 2 years. What's your decision going to be? I mean, you got to feed the wife and kids, right? You got yes, 5 months, no, 2 years. Where's your choice? You're not thinking. And the other thing is you got to understand, when you get arrested, now I'm speaking from my own experience, and I went to college in America and have a pretty good education. My mom and dad are college educated. My brother and sisters are all college educated and doctors and such. I went to college. The first time I was arrested, I was scared out of my wits. I could not think. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was like, oh, nothing computed here. I was scared. I thought I was going to be locked up forever. And I was probably arrested for some silly thing like, walking on the wrong side of the sidewalk. I spent 10 years on the road in the peace movement, so, blocking a public entrance. Or some silly overnight in jail kind of thing, right? But your mind, the first time this happens and you don't expect it, I mean, I was not a criminal. I wasn't out breaking law, breaking into cars and stealing stuff. I was in the peace movement, basically, and each time I was arrested, I never expected it. Well, I should say a few times I probably did because I pushed it. But most of the time you don't expect it. It just happens out of the blue. Bam, a car sees you, a cop car sees you coming down the street, doesn't like your looks, wheels around, slams you up over the hood, bam, spread eagles you, boom. You go into court, the cop lies under oath about you, you're like, what do you do? Your mind is blank. I'm just telling you. Now that's in speaking English, college educated, with all my rights read to me. You know what I mean? It's just, you're slammed up against the wall. You don't get it. You're not used to being arrested and stuck in a slammer and not knowing anything, not being able to talk to anybody, that you know. Well, these people are from Guatemala or Mexico, and they're poor, so they're powerless. So if my brain worked that way, and I was arrested in America with American college education, their brains are totally into what they call trauma zone. It just shuts down, and they're very traumatized. And for some of them, Spanish was their second language. And so they spoke Quiche or some of the Guatemalan dialect, Mayan dialect. And so for the first, and I'm just telling you this from my own, it takes you about 3 days in jail just to settle down and figure out where the bathroom is and whether you can drink coffee or not. Especially your first time. After you've been in for a few times, you get used to it. Okay, no, this is what's going to happen. And you got to change for each jail. I mean, I was in probably 10, 12 times, so, So, you get the kind of get down how the system works. But I was arrested in Mexico, so here's a good example. I was arrested in Mexico. I had no idea what was going on. I had zero. Now, this is after a college education. I could read and write, and they were nice to me. And I had zero idea. I got deported out of Mexico. Okay, I would have signed anything. You sign this. Oh, okay. I could have said, you shot 5 people and you agree that you'll do the death penalty. I wouldn't know what I signed, and I wouldn't care. Now that's me. And I'm not, even then I was on the road and stuff, but I wasn't powerless, and I was certainly educated. So what happened here, and they know this. Listen. The U.S. Attorney's Office knows this stuff. I mean, think about it. A lot of those ICE people, they're Hispanic. I mean, who do you think tells them how to do this stuff? Who do you think translates all this stuff? It's, Geraldo Gonzalez from Tejas, and his mom and dad were both wetbacks, and now he's an ICE officer, right? I mean, how about the Attorney General of the United States, Alberto Gonzalez, So they know about this stuff. So how much better can it be? If you know about it, then you know how to slam them.
You bring helicopters and
Yeah, guns and black and you got to understand the police state mentality. It works the same no matter what, from what I can tell. The black, come on, who else uses black for a whole cadre of officers? Remember the SS? Black. Would they black? They were brown shirts. No, they put on the black. Why? Power, fear. Black is about power and fear. Why is ICE? You know, the INS used to have green uniforms. Border Patrol, ever looked at Border Patrol? They're not black, they're green. Green uniforms, that's the Immigration Service, INS, green uniforms. Where'd the black come from? The black comes from the Department of Homeland Security. You know what the SS is? The SS was the overall police of the state of Germany. Before Hitler, there was no SS. There was individual police from individual departments in individual states. After they burned the Reichstag, Hitler created the SS. And actually the SS, he took the SS, they were a small group. He took them and he made them kind of the Uber police force of all of Germany. Collected all of German security forces under the SS. What did we do after 9/11? We took all the disparate Coast Guard and Treasury and, you know, Customs out of Treasury and the INS and all these different pieces, the air marshals. We put them under one department. So there was one command. There was no longer independent agencies. And now they're dressing them in black. The pieces start looking really scary when you start looking at it. Who are they going after? You know, the detail they did in Postville, they went after, I got an email from a teacher. They went in 3 weeks early and got all the Hispanic names out of the school records. And they found out where all Hispanics lived in town. And they apparently were going to go to the door after the raid. Now think about that. Detail. They do fine detail work on individual names, right? They trace back 2 or 3 generations who's Jewish. Detail work. And yet they get the huge tactical, statistical stuff wrong. Invasion of Russia. Invasion of Iraq. They get the big picture stuff totally wrong. Look at the economy right now. Look at Germany's economy. What did Germany do? It killed some of its finest workers. Incarcerated, imprisoned them. They didn't care about the economy. Why? Because power doesn't care about anything but power. It is not logical. Power is very supremely illogical, right? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And absolute corruption is death. Absolute corruption is annihilation, total of itself included. And that's what we're looking at. Maybe we can pull back from the brink. I'm not sure. But that's where we're going here. We have all the pieces in place. The economy is garbage. They don't have a clue on running it. Afghanistan's falling apart. Iraq is barely hanging in there. The only reason why it's hanging in there is because of the surge, and they've killed enough people now that there's less people to kill. You know, they separated. And you've got your ethnic separations. So, you know, why kill somebody that's the same religion as you? So what you've got is you've got all the pieces of the classical police state in place, and then this comes along and the judge rolls over with the prosecution. Bingo. Late 1930s Germany. You know, why do you think the Jews were so interested in this? It's not just because there was a kosher plant. They can relate to people being picked up for their ethnicity. You know? Could you imagine if they had not done this fast track and they did it in the Cattle Congress? Cattle Congress. Think about that. My sister, who's not Jewish at all, in New York, says, who was doing this? Cattle cars. What did they load the Germans in, or the Jews into in Germany? Into cattle cars. Where'd they put these people? Into the Cattle Congress. And they tried them en masse. Now think about if they had not done the fast track. You would have had a concentration camp, right? Of all people of one ethnicity locked up in the Cattle Congress for 3 and 4 or 5 months. The comparisons would be too raw. It'd be too obvious. So they couldn't have that. It's too obvious. So they do the fast track. You just, you know, they did a meatpacking plant up in Postville. They had another meatpacking plant at the Cattle Congress. Meatpacking. They just meatpack these people. Just stamped them, put them in a box, froze, next. Boom, stamp, put them in a box, froze it, next. This is all meatpacking. 17 clients to one lawyer. The lawyer couldn't speak the language, doesn't know the people, can't even get a feel for the story, doesn't know how they got their green card, and he tells them take the plea. How the hell can you do that? You don't have enough time to talk to your people. And plus you got to lose interpreters, so you're going to take twice as long to talk to your people as you normally would. I usually spend an hour or two just figuring out where my client's coming from. And I can speak Spanish, somewhat. And I got good, I got people I work with all the time. So these guys never work with these interpreters. So you got an interpreter, and then you got a client. So the lawyers first got to figure out the interpreter, because the interpreter doesn't speak the same language the lawyer does. I mean, I've got different interpreters I use in this office because I do immigration law. Every interpreter is different. Every interpreter, I got to figure out where they're coming from and how to use them before I can get through to my client. The reason why is some interpreters change what you say. They don't like what you say, they change it, they modify it, they stifle it, right? Other ones interpret it too strictly. They just do word for word. They don't understand what you're saying. You see what I mean? So some interpreters don't like what you're saying, they change it. Some interpret it too literally and they don't get the meaning across. You got to figure out your interpreter before you can really talk to your client. And if you don't know your interpreter, you're not going to know if they're interpreting correctly for your client, right? If you got 17 people to do and all new interpreters that you've never worked with before, you can't do it in 5 days and be a competent, decent lawyer. I'm not saying they did anything wrong. I think the defense lawyers acted somewhat correctly. What are you going to do? You're going to fight over this and have your client sit in jail for 3 or 4 years when you could get them 5 months?
But then you were an immigration lawyer. They were not.
Right, they're not. They don't know anything about immigration. I mean, I know most of them, or a lot of them. They know a little to nothing. I teach them immigration law, criminal immigration law. So yeah, they don't know anything about that. So when they waive their rights for the deportation hearing, they have no idea what they're doing. The lawyers don't. But they can't help it, see, because they're put between the rock and the hard place, see, because they got 7 days to take the deal. They don't take the deal, then they get 2 years for their client in prison, federal prison. That's it.
Explain that in detail, because I'm not quite.
They gave them a deadline. You either accept the deal in 7 days. It's a drop-dead deadline. You don't take it, all deals are off. We're going to go to prison. We're going to go to trial. We've got 5 counts. At least 1, maybe 2 have mandatory 2-year minimums. So your client is looking anywhere from 2 to 5 years. Actual time. In federal court, they do 85%. So if you get actual time, 85% of actual time, that's a lot of time. You know what I mean? That's like 11 months out of 12 months, or whatever it is, or 10 and a half months out of 12 months. That's almost 5 years out of 5 years. So it's a drop-dead deadline. I got 17 clients that I got to see. They all speak a different language, and I've only got 7 days from start to finish to make a decision and to tell them that we're going to do it. So how do I sort that out in 7 days? All my clients are going to make and take it, right? Why? Because I can't sort it out otherwise. He wants it, he doesn't want it. This one maybe wants it, but maybe doesn't. This one doesn't know what the hell we're talking about, so we got to go slower. They're not going to get it in 7 days. This one over here just wants to get the hell out. They don't care what they plead to. Nah, you can't keep you can't keep track of all that. I'm a pretty good lawyer, and I can't keep track of that in 17 different clients in 5 days, 6 days. And remember, they don't speak the same language. I'm not at home. I'm going to Waterloo. I'm staying in a hotel. I'm working 12, 15 hours a day with the security, with all that shit. I don't have my facilities. I don't have my secretary. I don't have my office. I don't have all the resources I usually have. Oh, I got a question. Let me see. I get a book. I get it on the computer. I look it up. I call somebody. I don't have that. I'm in a friggin' cattle congress. I'm in a secure location. I got 17 clients. I got 6, 7 days to make this decision. On the first day, I only get called in on Friday. Monday, they do the raid, right? Friday, I get a little packet. You can't talk about over the weekend. Oh, they were called in the morning I think it was the morning. On the 12th, they were called in, wasn't it? I'm not sure what the timing is. You'll have to ask somebody else. But it was either on the Friday before or on the morning of. I think it was the Friday before. They were called. They said there's going to be a nice enforcement action. We can't tell you where. Here's the packet. Here's how we're going to do this. You're going to have 7 days to do it. We're going to have you interpreters. Each one's going to have 10 to 20. The average, I think, was 17 clients. And they told them. The U.S. attorney told them. And the judge helped put this together. And the reason why the judge helped put this together was because a Rule 11 plea cannot be done unless the judge agrees to it. Now, they got all this beforehand.